Welcome back. We're going to continue our journey in just explaining the developmental stages before we dive deeper into multiple different parts. And I'm still hoping that this helps you to frame what are the things that you have questions about, and what are the things that you would like for me to go delve in deeper. Certainly all of these things are on the table. So please let me know what it is that you would where you would like me to go. Today, we're going to follow up on stage 2, on sensory integration. And just look at, okay, so now that we've talked about registering the information, how do we discriminate that information? How do we use our processing speed of the different systems, the visual system, the auditory system, the vestibular being movement, proprioceptive being my joint sense so I can know where I'm moving in space, all of my 8 sensory systems. How do we discriminate them? How do we organize them with each other? When I am driving a car, I'm using my eyes to look in the road. So my eyes are looking forward. The periphery of my eyes is picking up that I'm passing something on the side, and I can see a stop sign coming up, but I'm not doing this, right? So I'm using movement vision and stable vision. My arms are doing things bilaterally while I'm hopefully steering my steering wheel. My feet is doing something, whether it's gas or brake at the bottom. I'm judging the distance between cars. I am thinking about where I'm going to be going today. I'm listening to the fact that somebody on the radio just said something interesting that I want to hear. All of that is beautiful integration. It's us using all of our sensory systems together. And so it's a valuable topic. It's you and I are so used to it. Every single day we're using it. And we just take it for granted. But what if that's not in place? Very crucial next stage of development for us to consider. So you want to think about how the information is coming in, how the information is being processed to the prefrontal cortex so we can enjoy that information and understand it. How does receiving that information and storing it help me to give my body feedback? What's it going to be like if I actually encounter that situation again, right? So that feedback system that helps me from my memory pieces, but also from not just my hippocampus memory, but my body memory. So we also very strongly need to consider the impact that reflexes may have in this stage. Are any reflexes inhibiting the movement patterns or the developmental patterns that we are seeing that we would like to address? And yes, reflexes are built in utero. I understand that. And I do know that we are born with certain reflexes in place, and that certain reflexes have a shorter lifespan and others need to be integrated along the way. Obviously, that's there, and we can talk a lot about reflexes if that's where you want to go. I'm trained in several different reflex methodologies, but I will never call myself a reflex therapist. I like to apply what I need to apply at the time that I need it. And then this whole concept of body awareness. And I see reports where people are addressing the idea of body awareness, but they may not be explaining why. They may not be putting together for the family, oh, the child's body awareness issue. Okay, so let's start some SI therapy, right? But it's much more crucial than that. If I'm not grounded in my body, if I don't understand what my body is doing in a certain space and time, that leaves me always having to use my cognitive energy to know where I am, instead of being available for what learning the environment is providing me, or what social the environment may be providing me. It takes up space that it doesn't need to. Our body awareness is intricate within us. It's something we simply rely on. We do not have to think it. If I have sufficient body awareness, I can open my cognitive brain to whatever I have to learn out there. That's where I have to focus. But if my body awareness is off, then I'm using my sensory systems in some shape or form to make sure I keep focused there so that I can keep myself in the space that I need to. Oops, and what did the teacher just say? What did that one just do? Right? So it's missing information because part of my working memory is spent on my body and not my entire working memory to the learning, as so many others are doing. Okay, so I want you to grapple with that, because so many kids are asked to be in a classroom and is asked to say, sit still, don't move, because if you move, I think you're distracting and I'm going to send you to somebody for ADHD medicine because you're not really doing what I need you to do in a classroom, which is completely correct, that they are not doing what you want or expecting them to do in a classroom, but it may not be the correct way to go, because it may not be a stimulant that they need. It may be that the body itself needs more input in order to survive and thrive. So we must take the body awareness piece very seriously, because kids are not able to learn their executive pathways for reading, math, all those wonderful pieces, if that's not in place. My body awareness is part of how I'm using my tools, how I'm learning to use a crayon, how I'm learning to cut with a scissor, how I'm learning to use a ruler, this toy, how I'm manipulating that toy. So much of my exposure to different objects, tools, have a fair complement of needing to understand that. So when we talk about those reflexes, there are multiple out there that can influence all kinds of parts of body awareness and beyond. And then I just want to make sure, even though we cannot right now extrapolate on each different sensory system, I want to make sure we all have all 8 of them down, right? So it is proprioception. If I move my joint, if I'm walking forward, there's little receptors in my knee, that in my joints, that tells me where I'm taking my knee towards. It's giving my body feedback, right? That's proprioception. You can only activate that if you yourself are moving. A massage on you cannot activate that. You have to move a limb yourself to do that. Then there's the vestibular system, which is the system that I use against gravity. So if I'm standing up against the pull of gravity, right? So that's my vestibular. Now that's a pivotal system. Many other sensory systems overlay, interrelay with vestibular. And vestibular is the only really sensory system that actually feeds back into itself. Visual system, what the eyes can see, what the eyes are perceiving, and how that's translated to the brain for analysis. My auditory system, how am I listening to you? The fact that I have a right ear that's very linked to the left brain for decoding of reading, for language, for socialization, for verbal narrative, sequential structure and logic. And then I have a left ear that's taking in all the nuances of the nonverbal tone of voice, the vowel sounds, very prominent for that piece, right? And so my auditory system makes my world come alive. My right ear is listening to the speaker. My left ear is picking up my environment. And it's so cool for us to consider what that actually means, especially for our auditory hypersensitive kids. We also need to think about the tactile system, the touch system. No, I don't want to touch that. No, thank you. No, thank you. Right. But by the way, I will touch it if I'm in control of it myself, but not if you ask me. Right. And you see these patterns, you're like, what does that mean? Is it really defensiveness, or what's going on here? And some kids are truly defensive. And there's 3 different pathways in the tactile system of the brain. And there's a very crude pathway that is really very involved in tactile defensiveness that's different from the DCML, which is the main discriminative pathway. Okay, so we can talk a lot about those pieces and what does the sensitivity do to serve the child? Because I want us to move away from the whole thing about talking about maladaptive response. We can talk about adaptive behavior all you want. I would like that. But what is really maladaptive? The olfactory system, the gustatory system, taste and smell. And remember that smell, olfactory, goes straight to the limbic system, right? So many kids who are not so okay in their sensory systems They need to smell everything they touch. They need to smell every food that they eat. And they use a sense of smell to tell the emotional center, is this okay or is this not? Am I safe or am I not? Right? So there's that overlay of that as well. And then, of course, interoception. Interoception is like, it's the eighth sensory system, and it was added in the last years. So it's probably the youngest system that's been added to our arsenal of toolkits, but it's been with us forever, right? And we always knew that it had a lot to do with hunger and thirst, and whether I need to go to the party or not. But more in the last years, I think, when Bud Craig, who wrote the book, How Do I Feel? I think he wrote the book in 2008. And when he came out with that book, was the first time that we really started thinking how crucial the interoceptive system was for actually feeling the emotions in our body. And oh boy, did that open a whole other can of worms. From the place of understanding the insula in the brain, where we have a special place for the feeling of disgust. That's actually one of the first ones that's developed in the baby, by the way. But we also have to think about trauma. And as Bessel van der Kolk says, how the body holds the score, right? So interesting things, interesting pieces for us to look at from different frames, right? But the interoceptive system is big. And really, if you look at Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory, when he talks about neuroception, and everything he says about neuroception, I want to say interoception. We're talking about the same vagus nerve, by the way. I think there's some really good discussions we can have together. So when we're looking at this whole body awareness piece, right, you have the exteroceptors, the things that's coming from the outside in. You have the interoceptors where it has to land. And I think it was Ruth Lanius. She talks about that there's an area in the brain called the periaqueductal gray. And it's the area, and it's brainstem. It's the area where the outside world meets the inside world. That, we can take in all this information, but we have to find a place for it to land. So I can expose a child to auditory stimuli. I can expose a child to tactile stimuli, visual stimuli, cognitive stimuli. But it's got to find a place to land, to integrate. Otherwise, it remains this file over here, this file over here, this file over here, and never the twain shall meet. We talked about proprioception, and I just want to point out to you that there's a lovely YouTube out, and it's called Living Without Proprioception. And the YouTube is actually a short of a huge, longer BBC documentary that was made from a man who basically lost his sense of proprioception due to a virus. And it's just very fascinating to hear him speak about how he has to compensate for everything through vision because he doesn't feel any sense of movement in his body. So I think what's interesting to know is how much the child has to overexert the visual system when the body awareness through proprioception is not there. That piece is the interesting piece you can take home from that video. So have a look at that. And then, of course, our body awareness also tells us, this is me, my physical body, my space bubble, and this is you, your physical body, and your space bubble. So we are going to share the same space, but we're not going to be intrusive, and we're not going to be avoidant and be too far away. We're going to have a balance that will help us to have a reciprocity and attunement with each other from a physical point of view, and we can share the same emotional space as we share our physical space. It's where we understand that in theory of mind, that I can understand that you have a different thought and feeling than I have. And I can understand that you may feel this way, but I feel this way. But this physical, emotional self is so crucial, and the emotional self needs a physical self on which to land. And of course, at this stage, we must look at how does this then all extrapolate into academics one day? If I'm not registering visual and auditory input, I'm not going to have enough working memory, and I'm not going to have enough attention. I'm not going to be able to decode my reading because I'm not taking in visual and auditory information at the same timing as Keith Rayner's research is pointing out in how it's working together, right? We can talk a lot more about that. I'm lining up what I need to line up so I can do my math number line, that I can understand symbols, that if I see this symbol, I can code it as this symbol. I can have imagination. I can have abstract thinking, that I can have reading comprehension. So all my joint attention relies on my nervous system picking up information. So let no one tell you that play is not academically relevant. It totally is. It's in that exploration of play that I develop these different sensory systems, that I can put it in a place where it can integrate so that I can put my nervous system to work in an occupational function such as reading. And of course, language development, much more now in this stage, right? And so at this point, we are basically having context-dependent words. And please, I'm not a speech-language pathologist, so every time I talk about language, I feel a little bit nervous. I can just tell you what I've learned over the years from my wonderful speech colleagues, and I might have some of them up as guests at some point. But you can follow through on requests and commands and personal references. You can protest, response, and greet. All of those pieces are available to you at this stage. So the stage dilemma here at the end of this stage is, how do I cope with this flood of information? So my first dilemma in growing up is, am I safe? Am I secure? My second dilemma is, what adaptive response can I make from all the information that I'm gathering? How do I cope? And so this is where we set up already at the very, very early stage. We set up, oh, I don't really see the same thing you are. I might be seeing double vision, but nobody may know that. They may not know I don't have binocular fusion. So what I'm doing is I'm suppressing one eye so I can look with one eye only. But that means I lose depth perception, which means my vestibular function is not going to look okay. Can you see the ripple effect? That's one example, right? But this is where we start setting those up. So either I'm going to work on the direct pathway in my networks of my brain, or I'm going to work on a bypath. Because you know what? If this is the body I got, I don't know that you've got a different body than mine. I don't know you're taking in information differently than I am. I'm going to use what I have. And so at this very early stage, we start setting up those bypaths. And if I can't figure it out, I may become disorganized and not be able to cope at all, overwhelmed. Okay, so I hope that was helpful to everyone. Again, my invitation to you is to let me know how this speaks to you and which parts of all of this would you like for us to extrapolate more on. Okay, until next time, take care.